Hey everyone, and welcome to the Pivot Boss Closing Report. I am Frank Ochoa, aka Pivot Boss, with your analysis for the upcoming session here, January 20th, 2016. The current session just closed here a little while ago, and one thing we talked about pre market was that the current existing downtrend is very bearish. The prevailing downtrend is extremely bearish. All bounces have been selling opportunities to new lows. Bounces have been selling opportunities. So when we had the pre-market bounce here, the first thing I mentioned was that don't fall in love with the pre-market rally here, because pre-market rallies are to be sold in a downtrending market for additional new lows. So right now, that's exactly what we saw. Price came into the zone here where we had the previous week's close 2 weeks ago, right into that LVN, and that's right where the market offered that zone and then offered it the rest of the session, where price eventually closed below that 1879s and also below the previous week's close, leaving a very significant tail above those zones. So a very impressive turnaround here. We obviously saw it coming. The expectation obviously is for price to reach the next downside targets. I've talked about before where I see those targets being. The next major targets to play to here are 1846, which is going to be the expansion key level CLVN right there. And then you have the expansion target at 1814 here, which is actually the edge of the key range. So this would be the 100% weekly target to the bear side, 1827. So these are the next targets to reach. I would say that any retest of prices at 1882 could be a selling opportunity in overnight trading, or perhaps into this LVN here. That LVN, let's see where it is. It's right 1889, 1888. So we could be looking at a bounce into 1882 to as high as 1888, somewhere in that zone. But I would say a bounce into that area offers an opportunity to sell, defend for a push lower. We have had some moves where prices have gone toward the upper end of the range. We've had a channel here. So we could certainly see a move into 1900 or so before this thing kind of gives out and gives way. But eventually, I believe this thing is coiling for additional downside price discovery into these targets. All right, let's take a look now at the intraday time frame just for a brief moment here. ES and an intraday, this is a 20,000 volume bar chart. You can see how prices have been trending lower within a channel. This channel right here has been present. We've talked about any pushes to the upper end of the channel offering selling opportunities to the downside. That's what we saw. And I would expect that pattern to continue to be the case. We also talked about the 1890 key level. I mentioned earlier that 1890 is the level that bulls want to defend. Failure to hold above 1890 suggests a return to value, which was 72.5 at the time, followed by a likely test to new lows. So we got that scenario play out. So we're going to continue to watch 72 value. Very important here. A nice, clean, balanced range for all intents and purposes. And after you see balance, you typically see expansion. All right, let's take a look at the crude oil chart. Here's crude oil in a daily time frame, downtrending environment. We've known this to be the case. We finally reached our 100% expansion target. This is the new H contract now. So we have rolled over to the new crude oil H6 contract. This is the March 2016 contract. And overall, you can see what the new key levels are. 41.72 up to 53.30. That's your key range. You see your expansion targets here with the 100% expansion target being reached over the last 2 days at 30.14. This target would correspond to the 28.91 target that we recently reached. Additionally, you can see that we have value areas or value levels, HVN. These are micro composite values. This is 49.13, 43.88, and 37.81 are the next key value levels above. So if or should we find a key low here soon, it would be a likely scenario to see price bounce back to the center of the recent range, followed by a likely return to the next highest key value reading, which right now would be 37.81. So that's down the road here. Right now, there appears to be further downside price discovery into those lower targets. Again, look for a continuation into 27.25 with additional weekly targets at 28.61 and 27.69. So those are the three major targets to play to the rest of the week. One key thing here to keep in mind, this is the way I teach Pivot Boss pivots as well, is that when you have rejection above a key weekly level here, so the previous week's close is 30.39, all prices above that level were rejected. As a matter of fact, all prices above 30.14 were rejected. When you have that implication right there, the implication is further downside price discovery. So I would say any retest of prices above that zone, the earliest rejection of those price levels in overnight trading could be the early idea for further weakness into that 27.25 target. Let's take a look at gold futures. This one has the rounded bottom that we've been covering here and has pulled back precisely to our 1072s. We had a zone between 77.90 and 72.10. That was the zone that we talked about bulls needed to defend for a shot at squeezing into 23.80 and 11.30. So right now that is still in play. I would say any failure to hold above 72.10, which would be a close below that level, would suggest that value is going offered, and then we would likely see a retest of lows followed by significant expansion. But right now, short term, it appears that there's a range that's forming here between 10.99 and 10.72. Expansion from this range will likely spark the next key wave of movement, which could be to the tune of about 60 points here. We got 10.55 low, 11.12 high. That's about the range that we could see to the upside if we should break 1100 to the upside here. All right, now let's take a look at our last futures contract. That's going to be the NQ. The NQ here has seen further downside price discovery, obviously after breaking and violating our key range at 44.49. We've reached both of our downside targets, and we also had 40.72 as the CLVN to defend if you're a buyer. And you can see price came right into that level and then saw a bounce here Friday, which led to a move as high as 42.26. This morning pre-market, I mentioned that any bounce is likely to be seen as a selling opportunity, and the level could be 42.26 into that zone. Any test into 42.26, which is the midpoint of the previous key range that formed back in August, this implies that further weakness should be seen ahead if prices can't reestablish themselves above 42.26. So in a downtrending market, you break a major pivot like 42.26. When price comes back to it, that's the area to defend for another round of weakness. So right now, the bears have it. I would say retesting the midpoint of that range, or 41.74, could offer a selling opportunity for a move into 40.60 and 40.14 with an outside shot at reaching 38.93 half sometime middle of next week. Any reestablishment above 42.26, so if price suddenly rallies through 42.26 and sees a big bid through that zone, defending it from above would be the key to seeing a move into 44.49. Until that happens, further downside price discovery will likely be seen, so you have to be a seller of the bounces, seller of the rips on the way down. All right, let's take a look at the intraday time frame to close this out. One thing that I notice about this time frame here, number one, prices are bouncing cleanly off the 25% daily expansion levels. These are each 25% key levels, very close on this time. So very good response off of those on the downtrending market here so far. You can see the downtrending pricing structure right here. That tells you the downtrend is in clear effect. 42.26 is here, so if price gets above 42.26, that could open the way to a move to 4400 very quickly. Otherwise, as long as 42.26 remains offered, I would say bears are looking to defend that zone for shots at new lows. All right, that's it for now. Let's see how this thing plays out heading into the rest of the week of trading. Good luck and trade well.